just reached his hand out. And when I went to touch it, boom, we immediately started flying. We flew to the same spot of the ranch. The other 12 elders met us. And for a couple hours every night, they sort of downloaded me, giving me this information, teaching me about ancient wisdom. Its number one message was, we are not self-sustainable. And that is not the way forward. We have to return to becoming self-sustainable. That is the number one message from the ancients. Because the minute you pull back, you're not living in the future, you're not relying on money to create your things, you're not looking at a clock to determine when you should do things, how you should do things, and you have no negative thoughts. That's the other hard part. You will be in the present. When I was 5 years old, I had my first experience. Actually, I woke up in the middle of the night and my grandfather was standing at the foot of my bed. And I'd only met him once before. And he said, look, I have some things that I want you to tell my father, his son, because I'm moving on. And so he gave me a message, and I got out of bed and I walked into my parents' room. And just as I come around the corner, my mother sits up in bed and says, what are you doing? Because it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And at the same time, the phone rings next to my father's bed. And I find out later on that it was the hospital calling to say that my grandfather had just passed. And my mother turned to me and said, look, go back to bed. And I said, well, That was the very first time, and my parents recognized that I did have a connection to the other side. When I was 14 or 15, my parents recognized that I had this ability, and it was interfering with my normal life. And so they sent me to a private funded psychic research center in 1974. And I did past life regression and time suspension and all of these things as a teenager in the early 70s. About 14 years ago, I ended up getting incredibly ill and struggled for about a year, to the point where I started to have really serious health problems, and then ended up being hospitalized 5 different times in about a 3 or 4 month period of time. Became allergic to all Western medicine. Once they even gave me drugs in the hospital and I coded out. I felt myself just leaving my body, and they couldn't help me. I couldn't find a way. And then it got to this evening. It was actually January 1st, 14 years ago. 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and there's a 10-foot tall spirit standing at my bed. And having been around this most of my life, I was sort of irreverent. I just thought, gosh, I'm really glad I have high ceilings. I mean, I didn't connect to the reality of it at all, right? And I just thought, well, okay. So I kind of semi-woke up, I thought, and said, what do you want? What are you doing here? And it was this huge white being. And he just, they don't talk. It's not about conversation. But energetically, he said, I've come to let you know that I will be returning, and I have some things I want to discuss with you and show you and whatever. And I thought, okay, I don't know how you got in here, but fine, go away. And went back to bed, and about 3 or 4 hours later, I woke up and I started to get incredibly ill, and so ill that I ended up in the hospital again, and was going down fast. And they couldn't figure it out, and they couldn't give me any drugs. They listed all the things I was allergic to. They couldn't help me, sent me home, packed me up, and went about 10 more days. And I could feel it starting to wane suddenly. I thought, oh, I might survive this. And that night I woke up again at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there he was standing at my bed again. And I said, no. Last time you were here, no. I don't want this. I don't want to die. I don't want to be sick. And he just stared at me, didn't say a word. And so I took a breath and I thought, this isn't going to go away. And I felt inside of me saying, okay, all right. And he just did this. He just reached his hand out. And when I went to touch it, boom, we immediately started flying. And we were flying through the air. And as we came down, I could see that we were actually coming down right at my ranch, right in the middle of my ranch. And it's like one of those silly dreams that you have when you're flying and then suddenly you're walking fast to stop. And we both do that. And this spirit is walking in front of me. And he's picking these things out of the ground, these black spikes, it looked like. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, these are still energetic remnants from past civilizations that are in the earth that I'm clearing because this is a sacred ground that needs to be reinvigorated. I said, okay. And I'm still just following behind him as we're walking. And I said, by the way, what's going on? And who are you? And he said, you can call me father. And I thought, well, yeah. And I thought, well, my father's dead, but you're not. Well, maybe it's another father from another lifetime. I really, it's so going so fast. And we walk a little further, and I can see on the left, there's a campfire, a huge campfire with a dozen ancient Native Americans just around it. And he walks up to it, and he turns to me, and he says, you have to understand that we're going to teach you, and we're going to train you in how to be one of us. And I thought, okay, but I don't even know who or what. And the short of it is, for the next 13 nights, every night he came to me, he put his hand out, we flew to the same spot of the ranch, the other 12 elders met us, and for a couple hours every night, they sort of downloaded me. I don't know how else to describe it, giving me this information, teaching me about ancient wisdom. And with it, they gave me a chapter of a book that they wanted me to write. And it was 13 nights and 13 chapters. And after the third night, because the father would give me the chapter first, he would kind of give me the information. And I felt it was almost like a seed that just came into me, and it had all of the information in it. And I would suspend it while I would go through this education with the ancients every night. And after the third night, I started to get really sick, where I was talking to my wife again. I said, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I said, I can't go through these dying experiences. And so that night when Father came, he said, look, we recognize that the physical body is not holding up to what we thought it would. So he created literally a seed, and it looked like this monster Easter egg. And he said, at the end of each night, I'm going to give this to you, and in it is the chapter. And that way you don't have to hold it in you while we go through the lessons. And when he put it in my hands, you could see the top had this incredible seam to it. This incredible white light was coming out of the seam. And when you moved your hands up, it opened up like a flower, and the words just came tumbling into me. And it was that chapter of that thing. And so at the end of the 2 to 3 hours every night, I would wake up, I would go downstairs, and I would write out what was the chapter in the book. On the seventh night, when I showed up, there was a much larger fire, and everyone was up, and there was a big celebration that seemed going on. And I said, what's happening? And they said, well, this is your night of rites. And I said, rights for what? And they said, we're going to, again, make you one of us. And one of the ancient natives walked over from the fire, and he tore off a small portion of his cloth. He had on like an animal skin top and bottom, and he tore it off, and he handed it to me. And he said, sew this onto your shirt. And I turned to Father, and I said, what is this? And he said, we don't have words for all these things. You ask all of these questions. And I'm like, okay, but what's going on? And he said, well, in ancient history, it's been called once or twice the exchanging of the cloth. And I still didn't quite understand it, but when I put it close to me, I could see it sewing into my own cloth. And he said, now, I want you to understand that we're going to give you your rights, and, we want you to take a section of Mother Earth, a square, and we want you to be responsible for the health of that section. We want you to make medicine for everyone that lives in that square, and we want you to look after Mother Earth's health in this square. And it happens to be a northern corner of Arizona, right where the ranch is. Okay, that makes sense. And do you agree to it? Yes, I agree to it. I mean, you're so, you're on the edge of dying. You're like, okay, whatever, I'm dying. So you're asking me these commitments in the future? I don't even know if I'm going to make it till tomorrow. Okay, sure. I agree. And it wasn't a cavalier, but it's just so impactful and so powerful. And you're just kind of, you don't even know what you're agreeing to. And I said, well, what are you making me? And he said, well, again, we don't have terms for it. And I said, well, you have to have some idea. It has to mean something to you. What are you making me? And they said the only way to explain it would be to be a teacher of other teachers, a shaman's shaman. I said, okay. And then they actually gave me a name within the ceremony, which was Konawak. It's a for the end, which I had misspelled 3 times. And he actually, in the dream, grabbed my mouth and made me say Konawak so that I could pronounce it properly. He said, "This is the name that you have going forward, and this is what we want you to do." And the edict was to, number one, protect these ancient plants that are the greatest medicinal plants on the planet. And I said, "Well, I don't know what they are." And they said, "We'll teach you." And they said, "These make all of the medicines necessary for every living creature on the planet to survive." And they said, "Do you agree then to create a center that will protect these plants and then help others around the globe make centers that they can grow these plants also and make natural medicine for them and their communities?" Okay, that's what I agreed to. And then there was a couple more things that they went through. And then he said, "Look, from this point on, the rest of the ceremony, you will not remember. It is sacred. It is not for you to understand." And I blacked out. And I woke up about an hour later, went downstairs, wrote down my experience and what I went through. And now, 14 years later, I've been able to sort of decipher all of the things and what it really meant. I didn't at the time, and at all, really. It just kept coming so fast. But what had happened is that when we get higher wisdom, when we get ancient wisdom, it actually has a frequency to it, just like our normal talking, but it is a higher frequency. So when you try to put that into a physical body on this level, it's like putting 10 volts in a 5-volt battery. It fries the physical body. So every time I would work with the book to try to publish it, to write it, I would get sick again. And I would continually fight this getting sick, trying to get the book finished. If I would try to rewrite the book, I would get sick. They didn't want a word changed. They didn't want anything interpreted. And it wasn't that they were so right, it's that they understood that when you put just the right words together, you elicit a response in the human body that allows them to think on a higher level. It's a very interesting concept. It's sort of like saying, look, you see the dog run. Okay, you think, all right, I see a dog running. But if you say, look, time is the only thing that's important, your brain goes, what do you mean the only thing that's important? And you start to think 50 different things. Well, is this time important? Do you mean a watch? Do you mean the future? Do you mean the past? So a combination of 5 simple words can elicit tremendous thought and tremendous understandings, where another 5 simple words put together doesn't do anything to you. So the book was written very simplistically, but it was put together in words such that every time that you read it, depending upon where you are, you'll actually get a different meaning from it. The 13 chapters, it is the path, karma, life force, coming earth changes, how to heal yourself, the physical body, the ethereal body. It was what they claimed it to be was a basic manual for how every person on earth used to understand what it was to be here. Sort of if you were an Atlantean, this is how you used to think. You used to realize, lived many times. You used to understand you are simply a ball of energy inside of a physical body in a temporary time. You used to understand that to heal someone, you actually had to change the frequency and the energy of them, not cut into them, not give them drugs, actually change their energetic makeup. So it was a basic manual that they say that man had forgotten over the last 5,000 years. A basic understanding that every human being that used to live on this planet carried around with them. Now, their further explanation of it was that it wasn't that we got stupid, it wasn't that we abandoned it out of ignorance. They explained that the universe is this enormous sort of shell, almost look at it as like a tunnel, right? And we, because now there's 100,000 million other planets that we've decided, that we finally realized, and there's a million other galaxies that exist. We, along with everything else, work in a complete rotation around that universal tunnel. We go in a complete circle. As you're traveling around in this circle on the inside of the universe, you get closer to other planets, to other galaxies, to other energies. And those planetary influences actually affect our thinking. They actually raise our vibration or lower our vibration. And so they explained for the last 2,000 years, we were in a part of the galaxy that was hidden from most of the rest of the planets in the universe. And because of that, we were in the dark ages. We were not getting the energies, the higher energies that exist in the universe. So we were not thinking in a higher way. And the Mayans described at 2012, not the end of the world, but a reuniting of the energies that exist in the rest of the universe that would change the planet, change the way we think, and change the way we live. So we just basically came back into the right neighborhood to start thinking clearly again. And the book was supposed to be sort of the introduction to help us remember how we used to think and live and treat the planet and each other, really. And at the end of 13 days, he came to me and he said, "That's it." He said, "For me to have come down to this level and to have communicated with you is an extraordinary event, and I will never be able to do it again. You will never see me again, but you are now a part of the other, and they will help you, these other ancient spirits, for anything that you need going forward." Because in ancient tradition, only true healers first heal themselves. That's just what they believe. They believe that great healers first have dying experiences, heal themselves, so that then they can help others do the same. I had to start finding ways of making medicine. So I started having dreams of this plant cures this, and this plant cures this. And if you put these two plants together, it will cure that. And I started to make medicine that started to cure myself. But it took me over a year to get functional again. I have to save grace for my family to put up with this. I mean, they never expected, I was this healthy, very successful human being that suddenly was crippled, couldn't do anything. And I went divergent too, as opposed to being so successful to suddenly all I care about is helping the planet. And it was confusing for everyone. But I had agreed, and I knew that they had said, look, you are only able to go forward and continue living if you agree to this new mission. What I will say, what's the most impactful to me, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, is that as I've started to understand even the book itself that I wrote, because I read it and go, I don't know where that came from. As I read it and start to learn myself, and I started to change the way that I lived, I can certainly understand and see how important it is. But how it connects to us is that every time that you have an illness, its purpose is to bring you back onto your path. The purpose of an illness is to make you change. And that is what's lost in our present understanding. Everyone thinks it's an inconvenience. Everyone thinks it's something that's bad that's happened to them. So what we find in our healing now that we try to teach people is that understand when the illness started. What were you doing? The parents were in the middle of a divorce. You were losing your job. There is 99.9% of the time a traumatic event happening in that person's life when that illness started. And that's what's connected to the illness. So until you address that issue, you will not be shown what is the physical remedy that will actually cure you. So it's not that physical remedies don't work, it's that they have to have a soul component to them for you to be able to actually have true healing. The ancients came to me last year and said, look, let's just take a normal person that's incarnate on Earth right now. They typically have had 40 to 50 lifetimes on planet Earth. That's here today because they've been around a long time. They said what they do as a spiritual entity that's lived 50 times is they take 4 or 5 of their lifetimes and they put them together into a new mini me. And they incarnate with the memory of those 5 lifetimes. And the purpose is to finish any of the lessons of those 5 lifetimes so that they evolve as a whole soul. So they lived as a carpenter, as a farmer, as a doctor. They now incarnate with those 3 lifetimes memories, and they have those skills, but they have those lessons that weren't finished. And their whole purpose for living this new life is to finish the last lifetime's lessons. So If they were a farmer in the 13th century and a doctor in the 15th century, their diet was very restricted. They maybe ate a little bit of poultry, but mostly greens and vegetables and rice. So when they come into a modern world, their body, their soul doesn't accept the modern food, constantly rejects it. But the minute they get foods that are in conjunction and connected to their past lives, they're immediately satiated. And the way that they taught me, to me, was crazy. We were up north. Native American came to me, Spirit, put his arm around me, and he flashed his hands up in the sky, and all the stars erased, like he had erased a blackboard. And then he threw up into the sky this diagram. And it was a big balloon with 50 small balloons inside of it, each of them a lifetime. And he said, look, and he just took 5 of the balloons and pulled it out of the 50. He said, this is a new incarnation. This is what comes into a physical body and tries to refine those previous lifetimes in a combined effort and in a complete purposeful effort. So I'm sure you've had people that had near-death experiences that said that they choose the family that they came into. Right? Well, because you actually stand on the precipice of the worlds, and when you agree to incarnate, you'll get a choice. They'll go, look, you can choose this family, this family, this family, and this family, because these 5 different family experiences relate to the lessons that you want to learn. This family will teach humility that you want to learn. This family will teach you poverty that will teach you this other lesson from this other lifetime. You can see how coordinated it really is. There's no randomness to our life at all. When I was 15, I did past life regression, and I experienced 2 of them in that session in the early 70s. And that was the 1500s. I was a farmer. I lost my parents. It was just my sister and I. We had raised each other. And then another where I happened to be a librarian. I was a woman in the 1700s, and I worked in a library. Incongruent, it seems. But the other 3 were all what I call geographical memories. I was in China when I connected to the Chinese places. I was actually walking down the street in a village that I'd lived in 1,500 years ago. I actually will go to a place that you lived in a past life, and it comes to you. It's like a thunderbolt. I touched this building, and suddenly the video just started playing in my head. So the last lifetime that I had was in the 40s, where I was actually a film and television producer. I found my old office in this lifetime from my previous lifetime. And that sort of segues me into this concept that people talk about, well, how can a 5-year-old be a concert pianist? Well, he brought that lifetime forward. He was a concert pianist in his last lifetime, and that's one of his reincarnated purposes in this lifetime. He did it before. So when I became vice president of Paramount Pictures at the early age of only 30 years old, it didn't make any sense. Well, yes, it did, because I'd done it just in the last lifetime. And I had that sense when I was very young. When I was 5 or 6, I knew I knew how to make movies. I didn't have the understanding. I just knew it. It was just in me. So when I got on a film set in my early 20s, it was immediate for me. It was just natural. And I went from being a production assistant to being a producer in less than 2 years. It had nothing to do with my practical experience. People would just say, well, you have an instinct for this. Yeah, last lifetime. And again, you can't talk about it or bring it up to people, but that is the reality and how it happens. I would tell you one of the most important things that I saw in healing in the last year is that it all comes back to the purpose of your incarnation. So you can come back to my 5 lifetimes, right? 2 as an ancient Chinese, a couple of us, and as a film producer. So how would those work together, right? Well, the 2 lifetimes I lived in ancient China, I was a feudal warrior. All I did is go from town to town and fight. That's what you did back then in 600 AD. You got hired to fight whatever warlord was going on for a couple of years, and then you moved on to the next town and fought that fight. That's what I did. When I come into this lifetime, and I'm given the circumstances that I'm giving, what did I have to do? I had to fight for my life. And I had to find a way to right the wrongs to a certain extent. I fought in a purpose of trying to make the place better. I'm doing the same thing again in this lifetime. That's how they come together. You say, well, what about the librarian? Well, it's been incredible because I'm a voracious reader and have been since I was a child. And that's helped me tremendously. That's helped me become a writer. That's helped me do the work that I'm doing. That helps me be able to do these things that gets the message out to the people. So you can take those lifetimes and see exactly why I picked those five and made this combination into what I agree to do this time. So all illness then comes back to, if you are derivating from that path, if I didn't agree to become the healer and agree to write these books and agree to start helping and agree to start protecting these plants, I would simply exit. I would contract an illness, I would be gone. Because I would not be continuing the agreement that I have. Every time you incarnate with an agreement, and that agreement is you come to this planet if you agree to learn and you agree to evolve. And in these new channelings that we've done in the last year and a half, it's incredible information. It all ties back to the first book. All the information is the same, but it's almost like it's the workbook. It's like the explanation of what these simple understandings really mean. And to put it in a sort of concise bubble, the first four channelings are time, money, future, and negative thoughts. So you can't count money. You can't believe in time. Clock, time, it's a man made thing. You can't live in the future, and you can't have negative thoughts. And they say that if you can take those four principles and concentrate on them every day, what it will do is force you to live in the present. Now, that's such a right, it's such a common term, but I know that even myself, being in this for over 60 years, it still never resonated with me. Being in the present, what does it mean? Well, I guess it means you're supposed to be happy you're here. But now I understand, because they really mean it. They mean you never look at a clock. Ever. Ever. Because what it does is it constricts your ability to think. It constricts you're like, oh, I only have 5 minutes. That's not true. I'm constantly being proven that that's not true. I was doing some orders 4 or 5 months ago, and I had a feeling that the post office was going to close and I wasn't going to make them to the post in time. I didn't look at the clock. I said, well, I have an intuition that I should just keep going. And so I did. And I finished the order, and it was 10 minutes after 5, post office is closed. I then had the intuition, well, I should still go to the post office. I thought, well, and because you have to battle your mind. Your mind says, what are you, an idiot? You really going to listen to this stuff all the time? Put the stuff in the car, went to the post office. I thought, well, the grocery store is just a block past. I'll go to the grocery store if nothing happens. I pull into the post office. Sure enough, it's closed. I kind of chuckle to myself. And as I'm about to leave, I see the main gate open. And the head postmaster, who I know, is rolling out a cart because he's coming out to get all of the mail that's in the drive-through. And he sees me and he waves. And so I pull up to him and he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I kind of had these packages, but you're closed. He said, put them in my basket. Put him in his basket. I didn't even have to get out of the car to go to the post office that day. But had I listened to the clock, I would have actually curtailed my ability to live in the present. I would have changed everything that I was doing. They say the same thing about money. The minute you count money is the minute you limit yourself. The minute you say, okay, I've got to raise $5,000 to buy a new car, I've got to work this many hours, well, that's it. You've just told the universe that the only way you're going to get a new car is if you work more hours at a job that you hate. And that means that nothing else can happen. No one can give it to you. You can't win the lottery. Your brother can't give it to you because he bought a new car and thought you needed one. Nothing else can happen but your limiting thought of, I must now make money to get my thing. Can't count money, can't count time, can't live in the future. How do you do that? How do you do it in the modern world? I got to make a dentist appointment next week. You have to start operating intuitively. When someone says, "What are you doing tomorrow?" you have to say, "Living." So, well, but what are you going to do? I don't know. When I wake up in the morning, I'll know. And they're like, "Well, no, you can't live that way." Yes, you can. That's how we lived for thousands of years. That's how the ancients lived. Do you really think the Atlanteans walked around with wristwatches on their wrist? No. All of that traps us into having limited perspective and not being connected to everything. Because the minute you pull back, you're not living in the future. You're not relying on money to create your things. You're not looking at a clock to determine when you should do things, how you should do things, and you have no negative thoughts. That's the other hard part. You will be in the present. It will force you to be in the present. And what that does then is that means that you start to connect to everything. Because the brain is not running this minutia. I mean, the majority of the people out there have 100 thoughts in their heads all the time. And that's what separates them from the creator and from the life force that exists amongst us. I can go a couple days at a time without any thought. It's the only key to connect to exactly what's going on. So when I get up every morning, like the ancients, they would go to the river, they would wash their face, they would cleanse themselves, they would give thanks to the four directions, and they would sit in silence to wait for their intuitive direction of what to do that day. They would then be guided that this field is going to have a deer so that you can feed your family. This creek has berries that are finally ripening that you can pick. The only way you can connect to everything is if you have no thought. That's the only way it can get in. The ancients believed that everything is like a radio station, right? You can only listen to one radio channel at a time. If you put on two radio stations at once, what do you get? Noise, right? Nothing's discernible. Well, that's how most people are operating. They have so much going on, there's no room for their intuition to be heard. There's no room for their soul to actually connect and direct them. So they teach us change the station if you want to learn something or hear something, but you can only stay on one station at a time. And that's what frequency is really about. So, again, it's a combination of things, right? The biggest thing, though, is our planet moved into a part of the universe that now energies are hitting us and forcing us to wake up. You see it around you. And the couple of other channels that I've known for a long period of time have gotten other information very similar and has said that it's creating a division of the masses. Because, well, what you're seeing is that people are embracing it and suddenly becoming awake and aware. And what someone would call a tree hugger is no longer this abstract anymore. They're starting to say, look, I can understand what you're talking about. I can see a flower. I can feel a tree. I can hear things. And the other half is saying, no, 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 no. I want to stay in my bubble. I want to have my rich, I want to have my big car. I want to have my big, I want to have materialism. I want to be satiated on a physical level. I don't want to evolve. And because of that, they're fighting harder and harder to not wake it up. And that's why we're dividing. Is because half of the population is saying, no, we're waking up. We got to take care of this planet. We have to take care of each other. We have to respect every living thing on this planet. And the other half is saying, burn it down. Burn it down. Use every resource that there is. The planet will grow a new one. Don't worry about it. And they're forcing a divide further and further and further. But it is coming to a breaking point, unfortunately. And you can feel and see that. And that's because not only are we being forced by these outer planetary energies to change, but the Earth is being hit with those same energies, of course. That's why we're feeling it, it's because it's hitting the Earth. And if the Earth was healthier and not so polluted, it would be able to what we call transmute these energies easier. In other words, take them in and release them. But because the Earth is a little bit beat up, she's getting bombarded and not processing it so well. So what happens is for her to process all these extra energies, that 10 volts in a 5-volt battery, she has to find a way to release them back out. Earthquakes, major storms, rain, hurricanes, all these weather patterns that we are seeing is simply Mother Earth trying to balance herself from being hit with these higher energies. It's not a reaction to anything bad. You know, they're not condemning man for disrupting and being rude. I mean, man's being rude and he's polluting, but Mother Earth isn't rising up and saying, I'm going to kill all the people on the planet. That's not what this is about at all. She's saying, I'm being overwhelmed and I must find a way to release these energies so that I can stay in balance. 100 years ago, 92, 93% of the population was self sufficient. Today, less than 3% is self sufficient. Its number one message was, we are not self sustainable. And that is not the way forward. We have to return to becoming self sustainable. That is the number one message from the ancients. You know, you can't go 3 days without water. And yet, how many people have a stream or a water well? And we just agree to start buying bottled water? Well, that's okay. Food. The average food in your supermarket travels 1,200 miles. Again, all these things are so out of balance. You start to heal yourself by simply growing your own plants. It's not a Pollyanna sort of like you should grow your own plants so that you can survive. It's much, much, much further than that. When you start to consume the things that you grow, you will see your health change 100%. But even further than that, like I said, if you really pay attention to it, you don't have to eat as much food because it's grown in such a perfect way with such great love that the consumption is smaller. But I digress a little bit because the answer is really you have to start growing your own food. You have to start moving towards being self sustainable, not just because there's not going to be food available, because that's the way this planet is supposed to be. The creator didn't go and make this incredible world so that some entity could come in and charge you money for water and for power and for food. Do you really think God created this world so that you have to make money so that you can survive? It is so out of control. It makes me mad. Mad, not angry, but in just what? All of these resources are supposed to be free. We as human beings are supposed to enjoy the fruits of the earth, what it grows, what it has in terms of water, substance, making your own housing. All of that is supposed to be free. Why? So that you experience living on this planet in the way it's supposed to be, which is connecting to everything around it. And we've created this world where you go to work, you do your job, so you get your couple of dollars, so you go to your store, so that you eat, that you go to sleep, and you wake up and you do it again. That's not this planet. That is not the purpose of this planet. And that is not creating a spiritual evolution for anyone. Who is growing and learning living that type of life? Start growing your own food, start becoming self sustainable. And that is the path actually to your spiritual enlightenment because it will connect you to everything you have been disconnected from.